Good morning. We finished looking at chapter 19 of John today, verses 23 through the end of it. Jesus yesterday was on the cross, and Pilate had put the sign above his head, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews, and he said, "What I have written, I have written." I think about that sign, and sometimes you see a picture of Jesus on the cross with just the words INRI on it, and that's kind of the abbreviation for those words in the Latin or the Greek or the Hebrew or something. But with those words, Pilate had confirmed for all of us that Jesus is the Messiah, that Jesus is the King of the Jews, the Savior, the one who promised for all time. And he refused to change that sign. And that's an important part, I think, of the whole story of the crucifixion, is the truth of that sign. And then going on with what's here, the soldiers that crucified Jesus divided his outer garment and cast a lot for his inner garment, and John tells us that was to fulfill prophecy. And there's several items of prophecy that John tells us during the crucifixion that Jesus fulfills. And then John tells us, after the dividing of the garments, Jesus tells us of some people that were there. It was the mother of Jesus, Mary, and his mother's sister, not named, and then Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Clopas, might be the same Cleopas that was on the road. I don't know. It probably could be somebody else, but it could be just a different spelling. And then Mary Magdalene. So there were three Marys: his mother Mary, Mary the wife of Clopas, Mary Magdalene, and his aunt, his mother's sister, and then also the disciple John, the one who wrote this gospel for us. So in this gospel, we have an eyewitness account of the crucifixion of Jesus. It isn't, something that, someone else heard about, but John saw what happened. And we remember as we read through that, when in the garden during the trial of Jesus, as he went to Caiaphas and to Pilate and everything, John was the one first in the door with Peter. And so John has witnessed all of this. And he has told us this story as an eyewitness account. The whole gospel of John is an eyewitness account of Jesus. So John witnesses this when Jesus is on the cross, and Jesus sees his mother and his disciple John, the beloved disciple, and he looks and he says to John, "Behold your mother," and to his mother, "Behold your son." He has entrusted his mother into John's care and keeping. And normally, that would be, one of his brother's responsibilities, because Jesus had brothers, according to what we read in the Bible. But Jesus looks at John and says, "Take care of my mother." She was a widow. She didn't. Joseph was no longer in the picture. We don't hear anything more about him anyway. So Jesus asks his disciple John, his friend, his follower, to take care of his mother. And it says, and from that time, from that hour, the disciple took her into his own home. So he did what Jesus asked. He took care of Mary, the mother of Jesus. And again, now we go to the final I am statement, or the final two statements of Jesus, not I am, but what we would refer to as the 7 words of the cross, where Jesus is hanging on the cross and he says, "I thirst." And the soldiers dip a sponge in they say it's sour wine vinegar, or sour wine, that was sitting there. And they put the sponge up to his lips, and he takes a little drink of that. Whereas earlier he had refused the wine that was dipped, or with the camphor, with the drug that would have eased the pain and stuff. Jesus refused that wine, but he took this wine. And they say that one of the worst things on the cross would be the thirst that would come, and the pain. And it's just to think about the agony and the excruciating pain dying in that fashion. And if you haven't really looked and heard about how death on the cross came about, I invite you to do that. It is not pleasant at all. But anyway, we go back, and so Jesus has taken this drink of wine, and after he had received that little drink of wine off of that sponge, he says, "It is finished." And in John's gospel, it's Jesus said, and then he said. It isn't he cried out, or he shouted or anything that way. He said, and so that leaves open to us our interpretation of did Jesus proclaim "it is finished," with a loud cry, or as someone that was hanging on the cross, having trouble getting air and having trouble breathing, was it more it is finished? I mean, just to try to get it out. So I mean, that's another part of these things that's open to our interpretation. We don't know just how these words were said, but regardless, Jesus said the words, "It is finished," and then John tells us he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. And since this was the preparation day, the day before Passover, they didn't want to leave the bodies hanging on the cross. It would have been, I don't know if it would have been breaking tradition or breaking anything, but the people, especially Jesus' followers, did not want Jesus' body to be on the cross on spectacle that way, especially on the day of Passover. So they went to Pilate, and who went to Pilate? Joseph of Arimathea, who was one of the Sanhedrin, one of the ruling council. If you look back in Luke 23, verse 50, 51, somewhere back in there, it tells us that Joseph of Arimathea did not approve of the council's decision to try to get Jesus put to death. Joseph of Arimathea did not approve of this decision. And Nicodemus also, who was one of this council, one of this Sanhedrin of the top 70 of the rulers that had come to Jesus in John 3, was with Joseph of Arimathea. And I found it interesting that in my New King James Version, I'm getting ahead a little bit, but in the New King James Version, it says that as these two men came and took the body of Jesus to bury it, that Nicodemus brought 100 pounds of myrrh and aloe and spices. In the New International Version, which I read also on my phone, it says about 75 pounds. So there's, depending on the translation, there's a difference in how much spices they came to put in the tomb with the body. And the purpose of these spices had aroma, they had fragrance, and it was to cover up the stench of the decay of the body. Because in the Middle East, the temperatures were high, as we've had here in North Dakota the last few days, and we've, it doesn't take long for that process to happen. But I want to go back just a little bit. With Jesus on the cross, he had said, "It is finished," and Joseph and Nicodemus had gone to ask for the body, and the people were quite surprised that Jesus was already dead, because it usually was a much longer process than that, or time taking. And so the order was given to break the legs of the men on the cross, because they wouldn't be able to support their bodies, their weight with their legs, and everything would be on their shoulders and chest. They wouldn't be able to breathe. They would die much sooner. But since Jesus was already dead, they didn't break any bones on his body. Again, it says to fulfill Scripture, not one. They shall look upon him whom they pierced, not one of his bones shall be broken. And they pierced his side with a sword, it says. But the whole story of Jesus has culminated, not really quite culminated here, but his life on earth is now over. And the people, his followers, that have been watching and following and excitedly embracing him as a Messiah, find their hopes, their dreams, and everything just crushed and dashed. They took Jesus' body, it says, wrapped it in strips of linen with spices, and laid it in a newly formed tomb. But I think the most important thing for us to remember about the crucifixion, about Jesus' death on the cross, is that Jesus knew what was going to happen. He didn't call down powers from heaven to stop it. He could have, as they jeered at him, when they said he saved others, let him save himself, and I've said this before, that he didn't save himself. He died on that cross to save all of us. It's, for God so loved the world, he sent his only son, not to condemn, but so that we might be saved through him. Put verses 16 and 17 of John 3 together in that. But the culmination of Jesus' ministry, of Jesus' messiahship, is coming. Tomorrow we hear, the greatest part of the story. Well, maybe, it's the greatest part of Jesus' story, the resurrection. But the greatest part for each and every one of us is that, the love of God, the commitment of God for our salvation. Jesus says, the greatest love anyone can have is to lay down his life for his friends. And then he calls his disciples friends, you and me. We sing a song, Amigos de Christos, friends of the Lord. And just remember each and every day that you are a friend of the Lord, that he is your friend, that he walks with you, and that he encourages you, that he strengthens you, and that it's because of Jesus that we come to God, knowing fully the love, the grace that's there, knowing that forgiveness and acceptance are always there for each and every one. Tomorrow morning I should be back at 9 o'clock. We're taking off for home in a little bit here. I'm going to have our grandkids along, so you might see some little fingers waving in the background the next few days. May you enjoy today, and God's blessings go with you.